So I recently had the chance to borrow this Milkman 10-watt Pint, and I've been intrigued by Milkman amps since I heard about them on the Anderton's YouTube channel, as I am with a lot of very small production boutique manufacturers. I just love the passion and the sort of solo endeavour of getting your idea to market. And Milkman, I think, are great because they're not one of these companies just sort of reproducing particular styles of older amps. Whilst they might have the DNA of a Fender amp running through them, totally have their own sort of thing, their own style. Now, this video was supposed to be my Fender hand-wired Princeton versus the Milkman. Now, unfortunately, earlier this morning, I deleted some files from my computer that I thought I'd finished with, and it turned out all the Princeton video files were part of that. So I still have some of the audio. What I'm going to do, using the timestamps, at the end of the video, I'm going to put some of those Princeton clips because I'm going to refer to what the Princeton sounds like compared to the Milkman. And stupidly, I deleted those demos, but I have the audio from them. So yeah, if you're interested, just because when I mention certain terms, you know, I could just be making it up. So we might as well have a little bit of sound at the end. But a bit unusually, before we get to a clean demo, I want to actually show you with a pedal. This is the Magma 57 by Origin Effects, and it's one of the few bits of clips I managed to not delete with my Princeton. So there's a clip of the Princeton with the Magma in front of it, and then the Milkman with the Magma in front of it. And I just have to say, I think it's one of the most glorious sounds I've got from a small amp. But I'd like to know what you think. And at the end of the video, I've got another couple of clips each with this pedal on both of these amps, actually, if you just wanted to hear a bit more of it. But I think the Magma 57 does a really good thing of highlighting the difference between the amps. The is a more crystal clear, bell-like sound, and the Milkman is a more harmonic, fuzzy edge, flatter, less chimey sounding thing. But yeah, let's see what you think. Okay, so what is this amp like? And why do I love it, but I couldn't buy it? So I generally find with smaller amps that I've loved their cleans, and then I don't love the sound of the little small box cranked sound. Now, admittedly, I haven't played, for example, an old Tweed Champ or anything, which is so famous for producing massive recording sounds out of such a small enclosure. But in the room, for me, it just suffers slightly in comparison to some of the bigger amps that I've got. I love that feeling of space and bigness in the room. And so with my Princeton, for example, that has a 10-inch speaker, I sometimes find it just a little bit underwhelming, or it's just not the sound that I'm going for. But loads of people love that sound, so it's always intrigued me. Now, this Milkman is 10 watts. It's a 6V6 amp. But it's got a 12-inch speaker. So the enclosure is very slightly bigger than a Princeton, but it's not much bigger. And I just find that as I crank it, having that 12-inch speaker makes quite a lot of difference. What you heard at the beginning in the intro was this amp sort of cranked. Now, what's remarkable about this amp is at low volumes, it's the quietest thing I've ever heard in my life, which is sort of put me off. But let's hear a little bit of that clean. Amps, decibels max at about 80, but really mid-70s. So as you heard me saying that, at that point when the volume's on 3.5, which on a Princeton is actually pretty loud, probably around 85 decibels, this, and I had my decibel meter in front of me, this was only getting between 75 and 80 depending on how I hit it. And I mean, you can hear the pick louder, you can hear the changing of the pickup switch louder. So that really confused me when I first tried this, and for a few weeks it sat there and I turned the amp on every couple of days and go, have I got something wrong? And on the back of the amp there is like an attenuator, basically. You can turn down the power, which seems so unnecessary with an amp like this. But I think he has that on the back of all of the amps. Incidentally, whilst I personally can't recommend this amp unless it's purely for recording, because I think, as you've probably heard so far and hear a bit more, it is pretty fab with a mic in front of it. You know, when you can't tell what size of an amp it is really, it's so much bigger when you turn it up than you think. And that's the case with a lot of small amps. The 20 watt Creamer has the ability to change between 6V6 and 6L6 tubes just with a switch on the back to tell the amp which ones you've put in. So I think that makes that amp for 500 quid more. This is 2.5 grand. The Creamer's 3 grand. For 2.5 grand more, you would just go, why wouldn't you go for that? 20 watts, and you can change the tubes. And there's still an attenuator on the back to make it quieter. Okay, but even though I found this too quiet, what I found intriguing was when I then put one of my favourite pedals in front of it, the Shanks. I wanted to see if I put the volume up reasonably high on the Shanks and the gain low. So the volume was about 1 o'clock and the gain was about 9 o'clock. What would happen? So let's hear. So between that pedal and the amp itself, it brings out this beautiful sort of harmonic note separation, which is glorious actually. And the volume increase from the Shanks just made the amp come to life. So I think that's one way, if I had this amp, I would use it like that, because using when the gain's low on the Shanks, it's reasonably transparent. You could use a clon or something like that as well. You just bring the amp to life. It just pushes that front end, but also increases the volume. Now, another party trick for this amp is the beautiful tremolo. Now, I'm not short of beautiful tremolo in amps, from the Tone King, Sky King to the Bartel Rosalind and the Princeton itself. But this Milkman, in such a small thing, it really holds its own as a fantastic trem. So let's hear that. So you can hear as I increase the reverb throughout those clips as well, it's no slouch in the reverb department. It has that nice spring on the low level and that big washy thing on the top level. And again, the reverb and the trem seem to completely, from such a small box, you just don't expect it. Let me put it that way. So there is something magical about that, and it really surprised me when I first played it. I'm now going to increase the volume on the amp a little bit more, and still with the pedal, so you can hear how it copes with that, you know. And at this point, it is a reasonably full sounding thing. It's probably in the late 80s decibels wise, so it's not unmanageable for most people. Certainly for gigging, you could play it like this in a small gig and it would just sound awesome. So I don't think I dialed in that fuzz exactly the way I would have it, and it just felt a little bit fizzy, like the amp wasn't pushed enough to really then take that fuzz on. But I think you could work that out, and again, with that 12-inch speaker, it gives you a lot more flexibility than having a 10-inch speaker would, I personally think. I think we should hear it with some humbuckers. I've got the Gold SG out here, and I'm going to play it a couple of different volumes. And with the amp set higher on about volume 8, and with this actually did get up to sort of mid-90s decibels, and it really started to feel like a full-on amp. Yeah, I was really falling in love with this thing by now. So all of this to say basically that this is a beautiful amp. The sound it actually produces, especially when mic'd up, is so glorious and so not like any of the other amps I've got. It's wonderful. I said in yesterday's video where I revealed the second amp in 2 days that I would never buy another amp. I won't buy another amp, I promise myself. I'm going to give one caveat. If a Milkman Creamer comes up and I go and try it and fall in love with it, that I will get that. Yeah. Because I think in stereo with the amp I showed you yesterday, the Hook R20, which a bit heavier sounding, bit more scooped in the cleans, but you can add in mids and everything. I think they could work really well next to each other. But let's not talk about buying new amps. This was alone, and I'm really grateful that I had it. I think this is a perfect amp for you if the feeling of the air pushed in the room is not the most important bit to you. If so far you've played amps quietly anyway, and so you haven't got used to that big feeling of the sound and the reverberation, then I don't think you should hesitate in buying this amp if you like the sound of it. And if you're recording, it's a great thing to have in the arsenal. I could think if I ever made, you know, an EP or whatever, I could use an amp like this a lot because it just gives you so much sort of character and warmth, right? That real warmth. Yeah. So altogether, it's as pricey as other boutique amps. I think compared to some others like the Tone King Imperial Mark II, it's just about the same price. Then I would probably go for the Imperial because you get a lot more flexibility out of that. I've not played one though, so I don't know if it reaches quite the heights of this Milkman. And then when you get to the 20 watt Creamer, it's compared to the Tone King Sky King, so I'd really want to play the Creamer. Maybe if I found a 20 watt Creamer, I could get rid of my Tone King Sky King and change it for that. But altogether, I think this Milkman sound is fantastic and really carves itself a little niche that no other amp I've played has done exactly like that. So yeah, awesome. At the end here, there's some more clips with the Magma 57, which I just love that sound. It's like it feels to me like the beginning of Blade Runner. It might sound silly, but it's this sort of like, take a beautiful, beautiful tone and then sort of break it a little bit and just have this sort of crushing around your head feeling. With headphones on, I think that sound is just wonderful. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of Princeton at the end just to remind you, if you've not heard one in a while, what it sounds like clean. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think down in the comments of this sound. Can you compare it to another amp you know? Would you go for this 10 watt one or would you go for one of the bigger ones? Anyway, see you next time. Cheers. I've just got to come in here one last time before I go. I just edited together the audio only clips of the Princeton that I've been talking about. And I've got to say, I'm not sure I'm actually going to sell this amp in the end. It's really strange that in the room, I don't always love it. It just doesn't feel quite big enough. But when I record it, it's one of the most great sounds. Now you can hear it at 3.5 volume, 6 volume, and then 6 volume with the tremolo. I'd say it's not for my playing, but for the sound of it, I think you should just sit and listen to it. So yeah, I hope you enjoy that. Let me know what you think down in the comments again. And I might as well now butt in with my giveaway announcement that I haven't done in quite a few videos. This is the Duelist by Kingtone. This is my old one. It doesn't have the new dip switches on the outside, but there's still dip switches on the inside. So when I hit 6,000 subs, I'll give this away anywhere in the world. You've just got to sub to the channel and comment on a video, and I'll pick a name out of the hat. All right, cheers.